Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk about three things that happened last week, which I think give an idea of just how corrupt and dishonest our Prime Minister and our government are. But before I start, I'd just like to say something about comments, because I do get a lot of comments. Now, I posted my first video at the end of last February, and it was only ever intended to be just one video. I was really very annoyed about Brexit, which I saw and still see as being an act of utter insanity. And I just wanted to have a rant about it, which I did. And I really didn't think anybody would watch it. I thought if I got 100 views, that would be good. So I made this little video, stuck it up, and I didn't even check for several days if anybody had been watching it. But I came back 3 or 4 days later and was absolutely astonished to find that 15 or 20,000 people had watched it. But I also saw that there were hundreds of comments, and I immediately set about responding to these comments. But I realised very, very quickly that I just wasn't going to have the time. And, I'm extremely grateful for the fact that throughout all these videos I've made, I've had an awful lot of comments, and many of them have been very generous and very nice comments, and a lot of people have taken time to make very detailed comments and so on, and a lot of them have justified a response. But I felt either I reply to all of them or none of them, and so I simply because of time, I don't reply to comments, but I do read every single one of them. I think I've had something over 40,000 comments in the last 10 months, and I've read every single one, and I do appreciate it. And so if you don't mind continuing to comment if you want to, I'd be very grateful. Okay, so what happened last week? Well, there were three things I want to mention. The first was Prime Minister's questions. Now, Keir Starmer was off with COVID again this week, and so Angela Rayner was standing in for him. She asked a question in which she said that the Prime Minister said that no one had anything to worry about inflation. There was nothing to worry about. He immediately stood up and said he had never said such a thing. Now, it turns out that in fact he did say it. He said it in an interview with Beth Rigby on Sky News. So by the end of question time, Angela Rayner had received confirmation of this. So she raised a point of order with the Speaker. And the Speaker then said to Johnson, would you like to correct what you said? Would you like to withdraw whatever you said? And Johnson said no. And so what he was saying was, no, I am sticking by my lie. And I mean, that is his attitude, because he's lied so often before. We've all seen Peter Stefanovic's video where there's a whole stream of lies in Parliament. And it's got to the stage now where lying in Parliament, if it's the Prime Minister or Government Minister, it doesn't matter. Nobody takes any notice. It's just accepted that they can lie. Do you know, until this government, it has always been a question that if someone has deliberately lied to Parliament, this is has always been a resigning matter. You know, if you were caught lying to Parliament, that was it. If you had said something that wasn't true by mistake, or if it was accidental what you'd said, you'd always be given the opportunity to come withdraw or to clarify what you'd said. But now you could just lie and lie and lie. And because Johnson lies so much, it's such a bad example. It sets an example for all his ministers who know. They know they can lie as much as they like. If the boss is lying, why shouldn't they? And so we've got a situation now, we have a government who we don't know whether we can believe what they're saying or not. And a lot of the time, no doubt, they are lying to us. This is a terrible state of affairs. And it's really all down to Johnson, who believes he can just get away with anything because he spent his life lying and conning. The man is a liar and a con man. But it's really quite serious, and I'm not sure what can be done about it. If the Speaker's not prepared to stand up to him or not prepared to punish him for lying to Parliament, I'm not sure what anybody else can do. So we're probably stuck with him for the time being. The second issue I wanted to talk about is, again, PPE. Now, there's a lady called, excuse me, Michelle Mone, and She formed a lingerie company, a women's underwear company, years ago, and did very well. Ultimo, I think it's called. She became a friend of David Cameron, and so he put her in the Lords. The business had done well. Stick her in the House of Lords. She's now Baroness Mohun. These days, as you know, you don't have to be really distinguished to get to the House of Lords. All you need to be is a friend of the Prime Minister, or the brother of the Prime Minister, or you have to be somebody who is a friend of the Prime Minister who's got a nice house in Italy where you can go and stay, or Spain, or wherever it was, or you've got to be some sort of son of a Russian oligarch who entertains the Prime Minister in his Tuscan villa and so on. It's a question of who you know rather than what you've achieved in life getting to the House of Lords. But anyway, Michelle Mohun got into the House of Lords, and she's now the Baroness. Now, when the PPA fast track thing was set up, there's a guy called Theodore Agnew, Lord Agnew, in the House of Lords, who was dishing out some of these contracts. Michelle Mohun went along to him it was on the 7th of May 2020, and she said to him she wanted to recommend a company to supply PPE. The company, she said, was called PPE MedPro. Now, he must have said to her, "Okay, yeah, I'm sure I can put something your way." And the unfortunate thing was that this PPE MedPro didn't exist at that time. It was a non-existent company that she was pitching for. So a week later, a company was formed called PPE MedPro on the 12th of May, 7 days after she had first approached Lord Agnew. Now, Michelle Mohun says she has nothing to do with this company and nothing whatsoever to do with it. It's all arm's length, and neither she nor her husband are involved at all. And she's maintained that throughout. Her husband, a guy called Douglas Barrowman, is based in the Isle of Man, and he's in sort of finance and stuff and whatever they do in the Isle of Man. Now, this company, PPE MedPro, had two directors when it was formed. One was a guy called Anthony Page, and another one was a woman called Voiri Cool, both based in the Isle of Man. And as it happens, they both work for Michelle Mohun's husband. So she says she has no connection. But the company set up, which didn't exist when she'd applied to Lord Agnew, the company set up had two directors, both employed by her husband. And sure enough, they got a contract. I think their first contract was 122 million, and then they got another second contract. In all, they got contracts for 203 million pounds worth of PPE. Now, of course, they knew absolutely nothing about getting PPE, so they got hold of some guy in London, a guy called Boris who got who seems to be some sort of he's got a whole string of companies, a lot in finance and property and all sorts of different things. And in August, he set up a company called Loudwater Med Limited, and Loudwater Med Limited bought the stuff in China, the PPE, which was then supplied by PPE MedPro, and everybody was happy, and everybody made lots and lots and lots of money. I can tell you from experience, having dealt with China for many, many years, that on a contract like this, they'll have made at least 30% profit clear, which is on a 200 million deal is 60 million pounds. And no doubt that money will all go to the Isle of Man one way or another. Maybe it won't. But this is just absolute blatant corruption. Here is a woman in the House of Lords asking a man in the House of Lords to give her a contract for a company that didn't exist, which she then formed a week later, and out of which they'll have all got very rich. And this follows on top of, we know about all the other corruption through Parliament. We know about, for example, Patel, our Home Secretary. I mean, she wrote to Gove, and then she wrote to Hancock, trying to get a deal for a company of which a very close friend of hers was involved. And this company got a contract for £115 million worth of PPE, which it supplied at double the recommended price, despite warnings by civil servants that they were overpaying. So at least half of that 115 million contract would have been profit anyway. And then there was Hancock, wasn't there, with his landlord, his pub landlord. He got him a contract. There's so much corruption in this government because it's just acceptable. It's just fine. I mean, look at Jenrick getting rushing through a planning application on behalf of Richard Desmond, who we just met, because it had to be rushed through quickly, because had it taken more than 2 weeks, Desmond would have been left with a £45 million bill to Tower Hamlets, the poorest borough in London. But so he rushed it through. And you have to say, and this is really, really very important about all this, is that are these people getting kickbacks? Did Michel Mone get a kickback? Did Priti Patel get a kickback? Did Jenrick? Did Hancock? Are they getting kickbacks? How do we know? How do we know these firms are getting these really, really profitable deals? Easy peasy deals. So easy. All you do, get on Alibaba, find a company, order the stuff, and that's it, done. How do we know they're not all... There aren't chunks of money in different offshore accounts ready for them when they leave politics that nobody's ever going to ask about? We don't know. This is corruption at the heart of government, and this Michel Mone business is just a classic example. Now, the third issue I wanted to mention was the question of Lord Guyte and the wallpaper. Now, you remember that a guy called Alex Allen was asked to look into accusations of Priti Patel bullying, and he looked into it, investigated and so on, and he concluded in his final report that she had been guilty of bullying and that this was a breach of the ministerial code. Incidentally, by my counting, it was the, I think, 5th or 6th time she'd breached the ministerial code. Nonetheless, he presented this report to Johnson, who responded by saying he had 100% confidence in Patel and she was to remain in post. And Alex Allen, a very distinguished, a long-serving civil servant, was so outraged by this that he resigned immediately. Now, when it came to investigating the question of the wallpaper at Downing Street, Johnson appointed Lord Guyte to investigate. Now, Lord Guyte is an extremely distinguished man. He was in the army and then he became a diplomat. And then for the last 10 years, or for 10 years, until 2017, I think, he was private secretary to the Queen. So this man's not a slouch. I mean, this man is a man he's one of those sort of traditional Englishmen. He's somebody for whom honour, integrity and reputation would be more important than anything else. And he, in my view, probably rather foolishly accepted this brief to investigate the wallpaper, this request by Johnson. So anyway, he looked into it and his conclusion was that Johnson, well, he was told by Johnson that Johnson had no idea where the £52,000, that was one of the early payments, he had no idea where it came from. And Lord Guyte said that he thought Johnson had been unwise, not knowing the source of the funds paying for the decoration of the flat, but nonetheless he hadn't broken the ministerial code. Now, it subsequently transpired because the Electoral Commission wanted to look into this money because it had come via the Conservative Party, and they in fact fined the Conservative Party £17,800 for not keeping proper records and so on. Now, Johnson had told Lord Guyte that he had no idea where the money came from, and he didn't find out until February of last year, February 21. Now, it's subsequently, in fact, in the last week or two, come to light that Johnson had been WhatsApping Lord Brownlow in November, 6 months before he told 6 months before he told Lord Guyte he'd first found out about where the money came from. But that these WhatsApp messages, well, they were on an old phone, and he had to change his phone, and so he didn't know where it was and so on, and he wasn't able to produce these messages. And they only came to light because Lord Brownlow revealed them, because he was also being asked to provide whatever evidence he'd got. And so what Johnson has done is just made a complete fool of Lord Guyte. And Lord Guyte is obviously absolutely furious, and as you would expect it. I mean, he's been publicly embarrassed by a lying Prime Minister. And, you have to... You have to wonder, there is no limit to this man's dishonesty. And I suppose he's got away with it so often, he gets away with it so often, that it's just natural to him now, isn't it? Appoint somebody with a huge reputation like Lord Guyte, and then just mislead him, lie to him, don't give him all the details, make a fool of him. But when you look at this wallpaper, I mean, the total cost of decorating this flat was £140,000. Now, I don't know, nobody knows, but I wouldn't have thought Johnson's much interested in decor. I mean, judging by his appearance, he's not terribly sort of aware of what things look like around him, and I would have thought it's much more likely that his wife decided she wanted to spend lots and lots of money on decorating the flat. Who knows? That's pure conjecture. However, you have to look at the amount of money this man is spending on himself. When you look at £140,000 for the redecorating his flat, I mean, that's a fairly staggering amount. And then you look at £2.9 million spent to decorate a presidential briefing room in Downing Street. When you look at him buying building a presidential yacht, Queen didn't want anything to do with it, presidential yacht for £500 million. When you look at him leasing two huge jet planes, which seem to be parked up most of the time, with Union Jacks, which cost £900,000 to paint on the back of them, and you think this is all money spent on a man, on one man's image. And this is at a time when the country is in such dire straits. And the whole country is worried about how we're going to survive. Everybody, a lot of people will survive perfectly well, but an awful lot of people are going to find it very difficult to survive, because we know that inflation is going crazy. We know that electricity and gas prices are shooting up. We know that taxes are going up. Everything is getting more expensive. Everybody's more and more squeezed. Thousands and thousands of people are relying upon food banks. Children are going hungry. Schools probably need money spending on, I'm sure they do. Hospitals are completely overrun because of coronavirus, not least because of Johnson's policies of, just dithering until it's too late, as a result of which we've now got 150,000 COVID deaths. But when you look at all this money that he is spending, when the country so badly needs money, it is so insensitive, it is so stupid. And it just comes back to what I've said all along. This man is totally self-obsessed. And what he's doing at the same time is doing everything possible to make it difficult for anybody to object. Stopping demonstrations, making it illegal for whistleblowers or information from whistleblowers to be published and so on. He's just trying to become a dictator. He wants to be an autocratic ruler with all the trimmings. And when you look at what he does, you'd have thought right now, there are so many crises to deal with, not least of all Brexit, which is very, very far from finished and is going to get a lot more difficult and more complicated this year. And when you look at what he does, you'd have thought he'd be in meetings and studying details all the time in his office, 12 hours a day. What does he do every single day? You see this man, he must leave Downing Street, must be driven off 2 or 3 hours to a hospital somewhere or a vaccination centre or a factory, and you see him, he puts on a mask and he rolls up his sleeves, bumps a few elbows, he answers a question to somebody, a chosen journalist, and then gets in the car and goes back to London again. He spends so much time on photo opportunities, photos taken by one of his two private photographers, one of whom I think is getting £100,000 a year. You know, this man is laughing at us. He is laughing at us. He's mocking us, as is the whole government. And all the time, of course, he's under the thumb of of Steve Baker and the right-wing crazies in the Conservative Party. But it is all a terrible mess. I mean, I think there is some hope in that, as I've been saying for quite a long time now, I don't see him lasting much longer, because things are already so bad and they're going to get so much worse in the next few months. I suspect that the May elections are going to be so catastrophic for the Tories that they'll probably dump him pretty soon after that. But who knows? We'll see. But we can see that first year of 2022 that things are not changing. They're getting worse, if anything. And well, we'll see what happens next week. I'm sure there'll be plenty more scandals then. If you've listened this far, thank you very much. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd be grateful if you would do so. And if you don't mind hitting the like button as well, I'd be very grateful. And so until next time, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.